In this session, we are about to discuss the clause 7.1, which is resources of an international standard ISO IEC 22301-2019, that is security and resilience, business continuity management systems. In this session, we shall cover all the requirements of clause 7.1 resources in detail along with some examples for your ease. As the requirements of clause 7.1 depends upon the requirement of clause 1, clause 4 and clause 6 of the standard, I would like to recommend you referring these clauses for better understanding of clause 7.1. Let's discuss now about the outcome of this session. After completing this session, you will be enabled to understand and verify the implementation of the requirements of clause 7.1 of the ISO 22301-2019. You will also be able to determine and provide the human, technical, information and financial resources needed for the establishment, implementation, maintenance and continual improvement of the BCMS and the operation of the business continuity to meet the continuity requirements and achieve the BCMS objectives. Now, coming to the mandatory documentation requirements under this clause 7.1. According to this clause, there is no mandatory document required to meet the requirements of the standard. Let's discuss the clause 7.1 of ISO 22301-2019 resources. Let me read the requirement of the clause 7.1 first. It states, the organization shall determine and provide the resources needed for the establishment, implementation, maintenance and continual improvement of the BCMS. Now, let's understand this clause 7.1. The clause 7.1 states that ensure that your organization has determined and provided the resources needed for the establishment, implementation, maintenance and continual improvement of the BCMS. The requirements are to verify that organization has identified which resources it needs to make available in order to ensure the effective operation of the BCMS. Resources will often include raw materials, infrastructure, equipment and machineries, finance, manpower and technology, etc., all of which can be provided either internally or externally. Having sufficient resources is important for organization to ensure business continuity conformity and satisfying the requirements of the customers. For example, having sufficient workforce, equipments and funding are to confirm timely delivery of a product. Many organizations falls into BCMS non-conformities due to insufficient use of resources. Whether it is a long-term or short-term, the organization should identify the internal and external resources that are needed for the achievement of the organization's objectives. The organization's policies and methods for resource management should be consistent with its strategy. Top management must decide what resources organization must develop, procure or outsource to be competitive. Due to dynamics of the business environment, which is ever changing, these resources must be continually improved or transformed to enable organization to maintain its competitive advantage comparative to other organizations. To ensure that resources such as manpower, equipment and machineries, infrastructural facilities, materials, knowledge and finance are used effectively and efficiently, it is necessary to have BCMS processes in place to provide, allocate, observe, assess, optimize, maintain and safeguard those resources. Now, to understand this clause 7.1 of ISO 22301-2019 better, let me classify the resources in 5 major categories and discuss recommendations to auditors. The first category is general. Auditors should pursue and record evidence confirming that organization has considered the need for external resources in addition to the need for internal resources. Most organizations determine resources requirements during management review meetings. Auditors should review the minutes of meetings for evidence of resource allocation. Second category of resource is people. Auditors should seek and record evidence to confirm that organization has provided the staff necessary for the effective implementation of the BCMS and for the operation and control of its processes. Third category is infrastructure. Auditors should seek and record evidence to confirm that organization has provided the infrastructure needed for the effective implementation of the BCMS and for the operation and control of its processes. Fourth category of resources is environment. For the operation of processes, auditors should seek and record evidence to confirm that organization has identified, provided, and maintained the work environment necessary for achieving business continuity conformance. Now, the fifth and last category is monitoring and measuring resources. The process of monitoring and measuring resources for ISO 22301 ensures conformity for all products and services. This includes making sure that all equipments are valid, updated, calibrated, and working properly. All measurements that are taken must be accurate and recorded for monitoring purposes. Before being able to take accurate and recorded measurements, the resources that are needed to obtain these results must be determined. Once the needed resources have been identified and determined, they must also be acquired. When any product or service is measured, it must be measured according to the specific requirements that are outlined by ISO 22301. To ensure that these results are accurate, these guidelines must be carefully followed. Friends, it was about the clause 7.1 of ISO 22301-2019. I hope that you have a detailed idea about this clause. Now, coming to an important aspect of the standard, that is, practice writing non-conformity under this clause. Please see the auditor finding action report on the screen for writing non-conformities under this clause. I leave it up to you now. Please go through this and try to understand the various components of this non-conformance report. And now we have reached at the end of the session. I sincerely thank you all for your interest and attention.